All praise to the Most High, Ahia, and to his son, Yahayasha, Messiah, Yadahaya. This is Brother Holly here with the first Spirit of Truth broadcast here on the Ahia House channel, as well as the House of Ahia channel on this set apart Sabbath day. First and foremost, as always, I'd like to give all glory, praise, and honor to the great I am, he who is, was, and is to come, the Almighty One, Yadahaya, and to his son, Yahayasha Messiah, who gave himself for us that we might have life, and that life is in him, Yadahaya. Cheers. Oh, another. Another wonderful Sabbath, children. I couldn't be more pleased today. This week has been glorious. This week has been full of gain, for lack of a better term. The Most High is opening up doors of advancement, doors of opportunity, doors of enrichment. I couldn't be more excited. A lot of the things that needed to happen for the driveway to be paved, so to speak, for me to have the time and the place and the space to begin work on the word of Yahweh to the 12 tribes scattered precept version. That is coming to fruition. Most High is paving the street, paving the way. This work is going to come into fruition very soon, children. I'll be able to start on it full time a lot sooner than I thought initially. I thought it would be sometime in the first quarter of 2025, but it may be in the last quarter of 2024. All praises. High is moving, and I'm so thankful. There'll be more. I'll give you updates as they become available, children. But suffice it to say, the Most High is opening doors of opportunity to me. That I'm amazed at what He's done, and the speed and the accuracy of everything He's done. You know, when the scriptures say the Most High will give you the desire of your heart, believe it. It's the truth. He knows exactly what you like, how you like it, where you like it, when it should be, and all you have to do is walk in it as He has instructed you. Just walk by faith, not by sight, child, and the Most High will be with you in all your endeavors. All praises. We'll be reading from the Bible, King James Apocryphy version, the Truth Revealed and Restored. Abba, Father, Ahia, Yeshaya, Quadash, Akkad, Ancient Paleo Hebrew English Bible. The reason we're reading from this book is this is the ragtag version that I have of this particular document, this particular book of scriptures. And the reason we're reading from it today is, as with other more ragtag versions of the scriptures that I have, this one has been marked up pretty good. It's been precept pretty good, and it's just helpful. It's been, every time I say to you, will you highlight these versions of the scriptures that I have that are pretty bad shape physically, have been highlighted successfully, and the Most High has kept them in one piece. But this one's falling apart in my hands, children. Every time I open it, it gets a little worse. So I might have it in two halves one day real soon. But suffice to say, we'll use it as long as we can because it's precept. And the subject for this first broadcast is a simple one. When did the so-called Jews become Greeks? We all are familiar with the Christian dodge anytime we make a claim that we are the blood and bone descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They say that's fine because the Bible says the Apostle Saul, what they call Paul, said there's no difference between Jews and Greeks. And I agree. There is biblically no difference between a Jew and a Greek. And we're going to see why today. See, it's those books that they don't want you to read, the books of the Apocrypha, which means hidden books. And you gotta ask yourself this question, child, because I always ask myself the same question. Who hid them? If these are hidden books, who hid them? I'll let you know who hid them. The very people that don't want you reading them, that don't want people like me and you, Hebraic people, reading these Hebraic texts. For these Hebraic texts will give us understanding of the other Hebraic texts were written after them. The great apostle Saul told us to look into the scriptures, and for there they're good for our learning, that we may find hope and patience in the scriptures. But that was written beforehand, he said, was for our learning. So the books of the Apocrypha were written beforehand to the epistles of the great apostle. And he quoted from the Apocrypha books in many occasions, and we have demonstrated that here on these channels. In the series, A Case Being Made for the Apocrypha, we made at least I believe we did, we made a very successful case for the apostles, all of the apostles, but especially the apostle Saul, who the world ignorantly calls Paul, made a case that he had knowledge of these apocryphal books, and he quoted from them liberally. So, but that's a teaching that's already out here on these channels. Please, please, please reference it at your discretion. But today we're going to look into 2 Maccabees in a couple of moments at two little bits of scripture that gives a background on when exactly, factually, that the so-called Jews, or the people of Judea, the Yahayadan, as the scriptures would call them in the ancient Paleo, the Yahayadan became known as Greeks. Turn with me to 2 Maccabees in your Apocrypha. Let's start reading chapter 4, and let's start reading at verse 1. It says, "This Simon now, of whom we spake afore, having been a betrayer of the money and of his country, slandered Onias, as if he had terrified Herodias, and had been the worker of these evils. Thus was he bold to call him a traitor, that had deserved well of the city, and tended his own nation, and was so zealous of the laws. But when their hatred went so far that by one of Simon's faction murders were committed, Onias, seeing the danger of this contention," where this is 2 Maccabees 4:4. "Onias, seeing the danger of this contention, and that Opalus, as being the governor of Caesarea and Philene, did rage, and increase Simon's malice, he went to the king, not to be an accuser of his countrymen, but seeking the good of all, both public and private. For he saw it was impossible that the state should continue quiet, and Simon leave his folly, unless the king did look thereunto. But after the death of Cineas and Antilopius, called Ephenius, took the kingdom, Jason, the brother of Onias, labored underhand to be high priest." Will you highlight? I know this is a lot of gobbledygook and a lot of names and a lot of background, but there was a power struggle going on. It's being talked about here in 2 Maccabees chapter 4. It's a power struggle on who's going to be running things in Jerusalem. And they're under Greek captivity at the moment, and there's a power struggle between those who want to run after the way of the Greeks and those who want to keep the Most High's way. We're going to see who's going to win out. I'll read verse 7 again, 2 Maccabees 4:7. "But after the death of Cineas, when Antilopius, called Ephenius, took the kingdom, Jason, the brother of Onias, labored underhand to be high priest, promising unto the king by intercession 360 talents of silver, and of another revenue 80 talents. Besides this, he promised to assign 150 more, if he might have a license to set him up a place for exercise, and for training up of youth in the fashions of the heathen will you highlight, and to write them of Yaharazalam by the name of the Antiochians will you highlight. So this underhanded, this person was trying to become high priest through bribery. He wanted to bribe Antiochus, who was king over this province, king over Judea. He was a Greek. Onias, this underhanded, bribe-driven wannabe high priest, had told Antiochus that, hey, look, I'll give you so much in silver and 80 talents more, and all I want to do is set up a place of exercise, a gymnasium. And if you allow me to set up a place of exercise in the temple, a gymnasium in the temple, we will call the people of Jerusalem Antiochians. We'll call them by your name. They won't be Judeans no more. They won't be Yahayadin no more. They'll be called your people. They'll be called Greeks. Antiochians. I'll read it again. 2 Maccabees chapter 4, verse 8, promising unto the king by intercession 303 talents of silver, and of another revenue 80 talents. Besides this, he promised to assign 150 more, if he might have license to set up a place of exercise, and for the training up of youth in the fashion of the heathens, and to write them of Jerusalem by the name of Antiochians, which when the king had granted, he had gotten into his hand the rule he forthwith brought. He forthwith brought his own nation to Greekish fashion will you highlight. Here is when the Jews became Greeks, through this underhanded, bribe-driven, wicked, wannabe high priest Onias. He bribed the king, and the king took the bribe and gave him license to set up a gym, license to call the people Antiochian. And as long as he taught them, and he had license to teach the young people, he especially wanted to get the youth. He wanted to raise them up in the Grecian fashion. I'll read it again. 2 Maccabees chapter 4, verse 10, which when the king had granted, he had gotten into his hand the rule he forthwith brought his own nation to Grecian fashion, and the royal privileges granted of special favor to the Jews by the means of John the father of Ephialus, who went ambassador to Rome, and intimacy and aid he took away, and putting down the governments which were according to the law, he brought up new customs against the law. For he built gladly a place of exercise under the tower itself, and brought the chief young men under his subjection, and made them wear a hat. Now such was the height of Greek fashions we highlighted. This is 2 Maccabees 4 and 13. I'll read verse 12 again. For he built gladly a place of exercise under the tower itself, and brought the chief young men under his subjection. Remember, I mentioned earlier, the focus was on the youth. It made them wear a hat. Now such was the height of Greek fashions, and increase of heathenistic manners, through the exceeding profaneness of Jason, that ungodly wretch, and no high priest will you highlight. That the priest had no courage to serve any more at the altar, but despising the temple and neglecting the sacrifices, hastened to be partakers of the unlawful allowance in the place of exercise, after the game of discus called them forth, not setting by the honors of their fathers, but liking the glory of the Grecians best of all will you highlight. Here the whole priesthood stopped doing the sacrifices to follow after the manner of the Greeks. Here's when the Jews became Greeks. They became Greek by being called Greeks. They became Greeks by following after Grecian fashion, wearing hats. They became Greeks by turning their back on their own faith and taking up the religion of the Greeks, liking their religion best of all. 2 Maccabees 4:16, by reason whereof sore calamity came upon them, that they had them to be their enemies and avengers, whose custom they followed so earnestly, and unto whom they desired to be like in all things, will you highlight. There was no back and forth. No, they gave themselves wholly to being Greeks, to being idolatrous, swine-eating Greeks. Wow. For verse 17, 2 Maccabees 4:17, for it is not a light thing to do wickedly against the laws of Abba, but the time following shall declare these things. Turn over, if you will, to another place in 2 Maccabees. 2 Maccabees chapter 6. Let's start reading there at verse 1. Well, let's read let's read 2 Maccabees 5. 2 Maccabees 5, let's start reading at verse 21. So when Antiochus had carried out of the temple 1,080,800 talents, he departed in all haste unto Antiochia, wheeling in his pride to make the land navigable and the sea passable by foot. Such was the haughtiness of his mind. And he left governors to vex the nation of the nation. At Jerusalem, Philip, for his own country, a Praetorian, and for manners more barbarous than he that set him there, and Garzian, Antiochus, and besides Medeles, who's worse than all the rest bear a heavy hand over the citizens, having a malicious mind against his countrymen, the Jews. So they set up. Not only did they set up, Antiochus set up people of his own ilk, actual factual Greek by nation. No, he set up some sympathizers, some Hebrews that had gone full board, as long as they would treat their own people wrong. Wow. Second Maccabees 5 and 24, he sent also the detestable ringleader Antiochus with an army of 22,000, commanding him to slay all those that were in their best age, and to sell the women and the younger sort, whose coming to Jerusalem and pretending peace did forbear till the Quadacia day of the Sabbath, when taking the Jews, keeping the Quadacia day, he commanded his men to arm themselves. And so he slew all them that were gone to celebrating of the Sabbath, and running through the city with weapons slew a great multitude. But Judas Maccabeus with 9 others or thereabout withdrew himself into the wilderness, and lived in the mountains after the manner of beasts, and with his company, who fed on herbs continuously, lest they should be partakers of the pollution we highlight. We had 10 survivors. This ungodly wretch waited till the Sabbath day. He came in talking peace, waited till the Sabbath day to attack the people of Jerusalem. And while they were keeping the Sabbath, a day we are forbidden in Torah to go to war on, they made war against him and overcame them. This is the history that I want you to know. This is the history on how the Jews came to be known as Greeks. So what the Apostle Saul was saying, there's no difference between Jews and Greeks. He ain't talking about national Greeks. Nah, is he? He's talking about these Jews that became Greeks through their own admission or their own commission, and by being forced to follow after the ways of the Greeks. Let's read that. Second Maccabees chapter 6, verse 1. Not long after this, the king sent an old man of Athens to compel the Jews to depart from the laws of their fathers and not to live after the laws of Alahiah will you highlight. So, the king going to send an old geezer, it's probably some old philosopher from Athens, a native Jew, a native Greek, to get the people in occupied Jerusalem to give up following after the laws of the Most High. I read it again. Not long after this, the king sent an old man of Athens to compel the Jews to depart from the laws of their fathers and not to live after the laws of Alahiah, and to pollute also the temple in Jerusalem, and to call the temple of, and to call it the temple of Jupiter Olympius, and that of Garzim, of Jupiter, the defender of strangers, as they did desire that dwell in the place. The coming in of this mischief was sore and grievous to the people. Will you highlight? For the temple was filled with riot and reveling by the Gentiles, who dallied with harlots and had to do with women within the circuit of the Quadashia places, and besides that brought in things that were not lawful. The altar also was filled with profane things, which the law forbid. We highlight. Neither was it lawful for a man to keep Sabbath days, or ancient feasts, or to profess himself at all to be a Jew. Will you highlight? You couldn't keep the Sabbath days, nor the feasts. You couldn't keep Pentecost, couldn't keep Tabernacles, couldn't keep unleavened bread, couldn't keep none of it. Day of Atonement, none of it. And it was unlawful to be called a Jew. Were these people in Jerusalem Jews? Were they Hebrews? Were they children of Jacob? Absolutely. They were the blood bone descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the covenant people of the Most High. But they were under Greek occupation. And the Greeks made it illegal to even call yourself a Jew. We found out in 2 Maccabees chapter 4 what they called themselves. Antiochians. They called themselves Greeks. And some of them became barbarous in their behavior. They lived after the Grecian fast, liking it best of all. Even some of the priesthood liked living after the Grecian way best of all. I'll read it again. 2 Maccabees chapter 6, verse 4. For the temple was filled with riot and reveling by the Gentiles, who dallied with harlots, and had to do with women within the circuit of the holy places, and besides that brought in things that were not lawful. The altar was also was filled with profane things, which the law forbids. Neither was it lawful for a man to keep Sabbath days or ancient feasts, or to profess himself at all to be a Jew. And in the day of the king's birth, every month, they were brought by bitter constraint to eat of the sacrifices. And when the fast of Barabbas was kept, the Jews were compelled to go in procession to Barabbas carrying ivy. We highlight. So they were forced to eat profane things and to practice profane religious activities. They were forced to go and worship an idol carrying ivy. Wow. Moreover, there went out a decree to the neighbor cities of the heathen by suggestion of Ptolemy against the Jews that they should observe the same fashions and be partakers of their sacrifices with Yahweh. They just wasn't satisfied that the Jews in Jerusalem had to act like heathen. They wanted to make sure everywhere a Jew was that they were practicing heathenism, that they were acting in the Grecian fashion, that they were acting out in a way that was making them detestable to the Most High, abominable in His sight. Wow, I read it again. Moreover, there went out a decree to the neighbor cities of the heathen by the suggestion of Ptolemy against the Jews that they should observe the same fashions and be partakers of their sacrifices. And whoso would not conform themselves to the manner of the Gentiles should be put to death with your highlight. There it is. If you wouldn't act like a Gentile. So when you read in the New Testament where the Apostle Saul, who the world ignorantly calls Paul, saying you were Gentiles when you were following after dumb idols or idols that cannot speak. When you were an idolater, you were Gentile. You don't get to change your nationality. Your nationality is not based on your practice. No, they were called Gentiles because of the behavior of the person. And we read it right here. You couldn't call yourself a Jew. And if you wouldn't, there go the attacks again. They always start when I make a point. You couldn't call yourself a Jew. We read that. And now if you don't follow after their heathenistic customs, they're going to put you to death. I'll read it again. 2 Maccabees, chapter 6, verse 9. And whoso would not conform themselves to the manner of the Gentiles should be put to death. Then might a man have seen the present misery. For there were 2 women brought who had circumcised their children, whom when they had openly led around about the city, the babes hanging at their breasts, they cast them down headlong from the wall, will you highlight? And others that had run together into caves nearby to keep the Sabbath day secretly, being discovered by Philip, were all burnt together because they made a conscience to help themselves for the honor of the most sacred day. Now I beseech those that read this book that they be not discouraged by these calamities, but that they judge those punishments to not be for destruction, but for a chastening of our nation. For it is a token of his great goodness when wicked doers are not suffered any long time before with punished. For not as with other nations whom the Savior patiently forbeareth to punish, till they come to the fullness of their sins, so dealeth he with us, lest that being come to the height of sin afterwards, he should take vengeance on us. And therefore he never withdraweth his mercy from us, and though he punishes with adversity, yet he doth never forsake his people. Will you highlight? See, when you hear about us being forced to eat profane things, when you hear about us being unlawful to call yourself a Jew, when you hear about you having to worship after the manner of the heathen, when you hear about all these things, you know these things are for our chastening. These things are also to separate us, so to be clear who the Most High's people are and who they are not. They know who you are. They know. The heathen know. When the great apostle said there's no difference between Jew and Greek, what he was talking about. He was talking about there's no difference between Jew and Greek. Because the Jews of Jerusalem under the reign of Antiochus were forced to be Greeks. All praises to the Most High, Ahiah, and to his son, Yahayasha, Messiah, Yadah, Hayah.